Can you smoke a frozen Boston butt? Sure you can. I mean, I could smoke my shoes, but they're probably not going to be good. Maybe the better question would be, can you smoke a fully frozen Boston butt and turn out great barbecue? That's what we're going to try to do today on Peppercoat Barbecue. I'm Matt, and welcome to the Peppercoat Deck. This little science experiment began about 5.5 hours ago. So the premise is you wake up one morning and it's the day of the big barbecue, but you forgot to thaw out the Boston butt or your pork shoulder, whatever it may be. Can you still turn out great barbecue by the time everyone gets there that evening? So I came out this morning at 5 o'clock and I loaded up my Oklahoma Joe's Bronco with a mixture of lump charcoal briquettes and then a few pieces of cherry wood just for a little extra flavor. Got that lit up. I'm using my S1 and my Breezo today to keep track of the temperature and to regulate the temperature. I have an entire video on my channel that talks about this setup, and I'll leave a link to that. And there's also a link to the Chef's Temp website if you're interested in one of these devices. There's not a lot you can do with a frozen fork butt. There's no trimming. There's no putting a probe in it to keep track of the temperature. I typically don't use a binder or a slather, but the salt just kind of rolls off of it. So I use mustard as a little bit of a binder with some salt and pepper because I want to keep the flavor profile as close as I can to what I typically make to see how this emergency barbecue stacks up against regular barbecue. 2 hours in, I checked on it and I tried to probe it then. It was still frozen in the middle after 2 hours, and you can see the outside was pretty dry. Which brings us to where we are now. It's about 10:45, so this pork butt's been on about 4 hours and 15 minutes. We're holding at 255 degrees. I'm going to open this up, maybe give it another spritz, depending on what it looks like, and then we're going to try to get the probe in it now. See, it's getting pretty dry around the outside here. So I'm going to go ahead and give it a spritz, getting just a tiny bit of pullback on this bone. And we'll see if we can get our probe in now. So after 4 hours and 15 minutes of cooking at around 250 to 260, we're only showing 82 degrees on an internal temperature. So got a ways to go. This Boston butt's been smoking for 6.5 hours. You may have noticed there's been a little change in the weather. Even if we can get a great pork butt, there's nothing we can do about the weather, so we're just going to roll with it. Typically after 6 hours, I will pull these Boston butts off of the smoker, wrap them in butcher paper. With this one, we're running about 145 internal, and that's probably about 15 degrees below where I'm usually at around the 6 hour mark. But we're going to go ahead and pull this one off, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to prep it to finish. We're getting a nice bark, getting some decent fat render here on the top. One of the things that I'm curious about, because this is probably 15 to 20 degrees behind what a typical pork butt would be if it was defrosted, is I just want to know how much difference there is in the temperature of the outside versus what we're picking up on this internal probe. So I'm just going to take a few measurements around the outside. It's only 154 in the money muscle. Got 163 back here on the backside. 165. Let's see right on top. 155. 151. I was expecting to see more difference in the temperature than that, but that's a good thing. Now, since we are making an emergency barbecue, this emergency Boston butt, we forgot to thaw it out this morning, Maybe we need to get it done a little quicker. And since it is 15 to 20 degrees behind what I typically have at this point, instead of wrapping in butcher paper to finish in the oven at 285, I'm going to leave it in the aluminum pan, wrap it in aluminum foil, finish in the oven at 300. I just got an alarm. We're up to 203 degrees internal temperature. It has been in the oven about 2.5 hours. So total time has been around 9 hours since we put this frozen Boston butt on the smoker this morning. Now, I wanted to wrap this in the aluminum foil for a couple of reasons. One, it's going to capture all of those juices. It'll help it braise, hopefully keep it tender. I was afraid since we were cooking this one frozen that it may be a little dry, so it would help with that. I'm going to open this up now, see what it looks like, but then I'm going to lightly cover it and let it rest for probably another 45 minutes to an hour before we actually pull it. This is why I typically use butcher paper instead of aluminum foil. You can see all the juices that is in here, so we're naturally going to lose all of that bark on the bottom side. On the plus side, though, on the top we have a nice bark, and then this thing ought to be really nice and juicy. So we rested for about 45 minutes. I've got this out here on the cutting board now. Our bark actually looks pretty good. The bottom of it is very mushy. I could tell when I pulled it out of the pan. I put all of the juices that rendered out over here in this glass bowl just so you could see how much came out of there. And I'll probably use some of that to put back on it after I pull it just to keep it moist. So you can see this bark. We're going to pull the bone out here. I didn't notice the bone doesn't come out quite as easy as it usually does, but still pretty nice, pretty clean bone pull there. You can see the bottom side, what I'm talking about. Very mushy, lost a lot of that bark. Still a lot of fat down here that didn't render, and I'll clean that up as we pull it. So I can tell pulling this apart that it is a little bit tougher than usual. And I cooked this a little faster than usual, but not that much faster. So I think being frozen makes it a little tougher. It's definitely not frozen now. So you can see there's still a lot of fat and connective tissue in here, stuff that didn't render out, stuff that typically does. And anytime that I'm pulling a butt, I always like to take a paper towel and just kind of get some of that stuff out of here. My rule of thumb is if I don't want to eat it, I don't want to serve it to anybody else. Like this right here, this is pretty tough. I mean, we're going to chop it up, so it'll be okay. Got a pretty decent color, smoke ring in there. I don't think it's as deep as it usually is. So I got a little bit of this pulled and chopped up, and I want to give it a try. Trying to get a piece here that's got a little bit of the bark and then a little bit of the smoke. So the question was, when we started this morning, if you're out of time or if you put a frozen butt on the smoker, can you get good barbecue? I can tell a difference. I can tell it's not quite as smoky. That's probably because I finished it in an aluminum pan instead of the butcher paper, and some of that got washed out. I can tell that it's not as salty and it is not as peppery as usual because I couldn't get that good bind on there where we put the mustard on there just to try to get it to stick this morning. So I can tell the difference, but I have several people coming over here in about an hour. I'm going to put this into hold, keep it warm, and we'll see what they think. It's the next day, and I wanted to share with you the feedback that I got from my test crew, aka my family. So I like to give my thoughts, but also like to know what other people think about the food that I'm serving. So the first thing, I'll give you three things. The first thing was that it was dry. And I found that really surprising, although I noticed it when I ate it. You saw all the juices that had cooked out that it was sitting in. I really expected this thing to be moist and to be tender, and it was not. The second thing that I got back for the feedback, that it was tough, and I noticed that when I pulled it. It was a lot tougher than usual, but although after you chop that up, that's really not that noticeable, but it was something that I got back in the feedback, so it is noticeable. And then the third thing was that there was a lot of fat still in the barbecue, more than what there typically is. Even though I cleaned that out, there was just a lot of fat in there that did not render out. And I think all of this is due to it being frozen in the middle for so long. The middle part of that has less time to render out. The connective tissue has less time to render out. The outside's cooking, it's drying, and those juices are not being pushed out to the outside as quickly in the cooking process. So I think all of that adds to it. But at the end of the day, to answer the question, can you smoke a frozen Boston butt? Absolutely. Is it the best practice? No, it's definitely not. So if you have to do it, do it. If not, continue smoking your Boston butts the way that you do now. I appreciate you watching the channel. I really appreciate all of your comments, the thumbs up. It helps a lot. So I'll see you here next time on Peppercoat Barbecue.